Here we go, episode 134 of the Trash Talk Business Podcast. This is our opportunity every single week to improve our fighting position. So whether you're growing, scaling, getting out of junk removal, whatever you're doing, you've come to the right place. As always, I'm Andy Weins, and today I'm joined by Gordon Sheppard. Gordon, what brings you here today?
I help owners win and get more wins in their business.
All right, I'm all about wins. I like the W's, right? W's are a good thing. All right, so why do you do that? Again, softball questions. We start the show with the easy answer, right? Why do you do what you do? Right?
Yeah, the meaning of life. I just right. I'll just get that in one sentence, and we'll get that figured out. So, but underneath the goal for me is I work as a coach, facilitator, business advisor, and my whole shtick is to make sure that organizations are bulletproof from top to tail. But the way I start the conversation, and it's fun that we're here, is every conversation I'm in now, I'm going to ask you a question. And I'm going to take you through sort of my framework to show you why I asked the question.
Andy, this is your show, baby. I'm merely the host.
Andy, if you had to describe your biggest win in business in the last couple of years, which one would you pick? And tell me a little bit about it.
Nobody calls me before 9 a.m. and that's a win I celebrate every day.
Nice. And that's one.
Years ago it was I slept in on a Saturday one time. Right? So that is so my win is that my win is hell, even recently. Here's a win. We fired 3 people in the last month. All 3 of them were high performing individuals within our organization. And all 3 of them had issues when it came to values. And so now we're at a point in the company where we decide from a values position who has the privilege of working here and who has not. Because historically, I kept anybody that would show up. Historically, I looked past the people that were toxic because they were high performing. Historically, I'd keep people for months or years that did not fit the culture of a company I want to. Yesterday, we fired a guy that I was very high on. We promoted him early, and we fired him without really thinking twice about it. And in all 3 cases where we fired these individuals, all of them said something along the lines of thank you for the opportunity. Because we make it very clear what our values are. And it's very obvious when you're choosing yourself above the company. So that to me is a huge, that's it. And my involvement in all 3 firings was validation that the story, yep, that checks out. Yep, that makes sense. Yep, go ahead. So I knew about the firing ahead of time. I was not the one that made the decision. I'm the one that verified the data to execute at a high level. So that to me is a win.
You're I'm shooting fish in a barrel with what I'm about to take you through, because when I asked that question, what was your biggest win? And you've described really articulately, especially from an owner level. That's you've walked down the road a long way to get to that level of articulation that you've gotten to. And there's a lot of peaks and valleys.
6 months ago we weren't there, baby. 6 months ago
kidding.
we were in the living the value. Fuck, 6 months ago, that's a stretch. 2 months ago we were not there. 2 months ago I was in the valley of sorrow. 2 months ago it was because he's high performing. Why does he still have a job here? It's because he makes us a lot of money, or because we need him this week, or let's fire him next week, or let's try to hire someone to replace him. And now it's go, we will figure it the fuck out.
And no hesitation, because you're actually, and in fact, you'll be more profitable, especially because you're measuring the data down the road. There's a 5-part framework that comes after the question. So I say, hey, tell me about your latest win. And you just told me one that's actually nice, got a lot of meat on it, which is really good. 5-part framework. First question then becomes, what was the strategy behind those exits? What was the business strategy? Now you named the value part. What are those values, by the way? Can you articulate them?
Yep. So the values are very simple. Hungry, dependability, camaraderie. So hungry is you want to grow professionally and personally. Dependable. Say what you do what you say. Camaraderie. You want to work with others want to work with you. So we implemented EOS about a year ago, and I'm familiar with EOS, and I'm rereading Traction right now. I love what Gino does. I mess with all that, right? So now we used to evaluate, so we have 3-part evaluation of our organization with every person, right? So first thing is the values, right? And that's, again, pulled right from EOS, right? Do they match our values? Second thing is GWC. Do they get the job? Do they want the job? Do they have the capacity? Right. And the third thing is we evaluate essentially their competence. And we have 6 data points that we use there. So it's kinetic, or it's potential and kinetic energy. And this is something I developed years ago. So it's attitude, ability, adaptability, character, competence, camaraderie. There's that camaraderie word again, because that's a culmination of those 5 data points. From those 5 data points, people are going to want to work with you or not, right? And so all 3 of the firings we had recently was data that came from the field. The one gentleman, somebody called us, said, hey, this guy's breaking company policy. He'd already been warned twice. By the time he came back, he was gone. Next guy, he was doing stuff suspicious. They did it again. We just said, hey, this isn't a good fit. The guy the other day, again, company policy. The best thing is the guys in the field are reporting to the leadership. This is what's happening. They're very clear on what the values are, very clear on what our mission is. And then when they see something inconsistent, they also have the confidence to reach out to their supervisor and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And what beautiful thing was, a month ago when we fired the first guy, the employee that called us was pissed because he knows that this is he was our number 1 employee, rock star employee. And he said something along the lines of, if y'all don't fire him, y'all preaching and ain't living what you're preaching, right? You're coming from the pulpit and you're not walking what you talk. And we're like, yeah, no shit. But the fact that he already realized that, and after we let him go, we let the one employee go, the other employee came to us and said, I'm glad y'all let him go because you were losing an employee today either way. Either the guy that's breaking the rules or the guy that wants the rules to be followed, because I'm not going to sit here and let y'all talk about values and not follow through on it. So by us firing our number 1 performer, like Simon Sinek talks about, right? Who's the office asshole? It's going to be the highest performing individual with the lowest morals and values, right? So now, because we're a values-based company where we used to evaluate dollars per hour, who brought us in the most money, who are the most competence, right? When we look at that third element, now it's, hold on, who has the highest values? Who also understands this organization and the job that's in front of them? And now we don't really have to fire people. We evaluate talent, and my running line is the same thing. The amount of ink for a termination letter and a resignation letter is the exact same. So we allow people the opportunity to go be successful at another organization.
Pretty clear. And what's nice is I love the tone in your voice. It's super confident, because if we'd had this conversation 3 months ago, the ease in your conversation would not be there. Not a chance, right?
I'd have been like, here's the values on the wall, and here's what actually happens, right? I'll level with you,
Oh man, it takes forever to live those things. So I told you I'd take you through the 5 parts. The strategy piece, which is really important. It comes up, and so we talk about the values, what's going on there, how does that tie things in? The second part of the 5-part framework that I say when I ask people, what's your win, is what was the work plan to pull off these exits? What was the what, who, and when, the practical parts of getting those things done?
The information came up through the chain of command.
Yep.
So the what was violation of company policy, tested against what we all know the company policy and expectations are, and then the who is direct supervisor gets the integrator, HR, and then I'm made aware of once it's hey, this is signed and sealed. It's an awareness piece. I'm not part of the decision making matrix at that point. It's an awareness piece, and then when we do let people go. The how of that is there's a couple of methodologies we use. First thing, our integrator does all the firings, and he always has a third-party unbiased person. So the unbiased person is either our HR guy or our business development guy. So it's nobody within the chain of command, not operations, right? So they can keep their hands clean. It's never Andy, because I'll always have something to say. And the other thing he does that I really like, he doesn't sit down. When he's doing a termination, walk in. The person standing, he's standing. The third party unbiased person stays sitting. He never sits down. He has a termination letter. He very articulates, here's the policy. Here are the 2 or 3 instances where your behavior is inconsistent with the policy. And moving forward, we're moving on without you. He keeps it about a minute.
I love that standing piece. I've never heard that before. I think that is outstanding. Anybody listening to this would gain a ton from what you've just described. So the intentionality behind this is then we talked strategy, and we can go deeper, and I do full day workshops and work with teams to do this kind of thing. But then the second step is that work plan, because you need to move that strategy forward. Now you've got that clearly in place around this issue, right? other part then that comes up is in the third step is what people were involved in those terminations. Now, I've already heard you say there's some people that were terminated. There's them. There's you. You've described your integrator. You've described some other people that are in the process support piece. There also would be, in this case, your customers and how that would feel for them. Your suppliers would get wind of this too. Are there other people in sort of if we had to describe all the people that were involved?
Yep. Yeah, it also, it comes down to the customers. So the one guy, he was on a job site, he was acting in a way that was inconsistent with our values, kind of nefarious. And so what we did is we took another employee out and swapped him out. So we didn't want to have any disruption of service, and we didn't want to put an employee, that old adage, right? If I don't trust an employee in my house, I'm not going to put him in your house. So if an employee is doing things that breaks our fundamental trust, now thankfully he didn't do anything. Well, how do I say? He was going, so we do drunk removal. We don't go to people's houses. He was going in rooms that we weren't servicing, and that's huge red flag, right? That was it. It was like, okay, so we're just like, gotta go. So as far as the other people impacted, the goal there is we didn't cause a scene. We literally were like, hey, we're gonna swap you out because we got another guy available. We're gonna bring you back to work in the warehouse, right? So now it's the other employees are the most impactful ones. They're the ones that reported the incident. They're the ones that are going to pick up the workload, right, today and moving future days. As far as our vendors and suppliers and things like that, that's not the impact. The biggest people that impacts is the service member teams. Those are the guys, because right, if hell, even yesterday, the guy that we fired yesterday called in yesterday, so he was like pre-firing himself. We merely executed at that point, and so we had 12 guys on the schedule. So now only 11 guys show up, and it didn't even change our workflow. Like, fine. Right? Like, this guy was on the fence anyways. Good. And the employees that, when he doesn't show up, nobody complained. That's also another sign, right? That's we call it a CSM, the common sense metric. When other employees don't complain about somebody being gone, it's like, oh yeah. That makes sense. So the other employees are the most impacted people in the whole situation.
Yeah. And the other piece that's in there too, when we talk about the people part, is you as the leader, as the senior leader. How'd the win feel?
It felt great. It felt great that we maintain our standards. I come on this show every single week. I go out in the community at networking events. I go to sales presentations. I preach this values-based company. I preach this organization that follows recycling. So the whole reason I got fired was they were doing a job, and we talk about recycling. We bring things back. We have a 5-phase recovery process. I'm all about it. He sent mattresses to a transfer station because he didn't want to double handle them, because he didn't want to bring them back here and put them in our mattress room to be recycled. That's it. This wasn't super nefarious, right? This guy's not stealing money. This guy's not running people off the road. He told another employee to put mattresses on a dump truck to go to the transfer station because, quote unquote, more or less, I don't want to unload them later. And so the other employee who reports to him was like, okay, hold on, you're the team, you're the crew chief. I'm listening to you. But he called back to operations, and he's a newer employee. He's like, hey, this isn't consistent with our values, right? So now that guy, who I wasn't very high on, he's a newer guy, good guy, don't really know him that well, right? So the guy that I'm really high on is the one that breaking the rules, and the guy that I really barely know is the one that held the standard. And so when he came back yesterday, we were in a meeting, and the guys were coming back. I left the meeting with a I don't know, sales lady to go shake his hand and thank him for upholding the company standards, right? I owed it, right? And then it turned into, as all the guys came back, we had like a 5-minute powwow about why it matters, our values. And then now these guys are the ones talking about why our values matter, because they get it. We say we recycle, we got to recycle. Yeah, it's more work. Yes, glad we had this conversation. It is more work to put things on a truck and unload them by hand, and then put them in a warehouse, and then load them onto another truck to go get recycled. Yes, that is more work than putting them on a dump truck and taking them to landfill. That's what we do. We are a premium company. We have a premium price because we have premium values. And for people that don't want to follow our premium values, they can find an organization that values line up better with them.
It's so fun digging for gold. That 5-minute stand-up is rare in leadership and rare in company cultures. You mentioned the stand-up also that you do in the termination. That's unique to me. I haven't heard that in sort of my experience. So that's really wonderful. And again, the why you. And again, all these things would scream to your customers, especially your repeat customers, in a huge way. I'm just going to move on to the 4th step in this thing of like, why, tell me about your win. The 4th one is operationally, when you made those terminations, what was in place? I heard that there are policies in place. You have a procedure for termination. You know kind of how the rhythm of that goes. What are some of the other operational components that allowed those to occur? Did you have your legal covered, your insurance covered? You know what I mean? Like, are you covering off checking all the boxes?
Yeah, no, we have a whole we have, because of the amount of terminations, we're really good at it, right? I mean, that's the gratitude. So we have a whole offboarding process. So the offboarding process first is we contact HR to make sure that it's consistent, right? So we have an unbiased third party who is like, yep, this makes sense, right? Oh, we have documented. We make sure we have documented screenshots, text messages, emails, pictures, all that data, and that gets put in a file. Like, here's the reason. The termination letter is simple. It's not like that. It is simple. You, as of this day, you are no longer terminated, and for one reason. Not here's the 5 good reasons. No, here's the one reason you were terminated. So we had another guy that was terminated recently, but he didn't show up for 3 days in a row. He no called, no showed, and then show up 2 more days, but then called us 2 weeks later, asked for hours. We're like, yeah, no, 3 days. Like, state of Wisconsin, 3 days in a row, no call, no show is a voluntary separation. Right, and we know that. So when he filed for unemployment, we just got the text message and the screenshots of the schedule. It said, here are the 3 days he was scheduled. He didn't show up. Here's a text message that he acknowledged he didn't show up for 2 weeks. Right, and so then we sent it to our admin person. Our admin person collects the data because it's Wisconsin. We're an at-will state, right? People can come and go at will, right? So the only thing I'm fighting at that point is unemployment. And potentially, if someone wants to get, discrimination or something like that, we never face that. Essentially, I'm documenting everything so that I can avoid paying unemployment for those that don't qualify. Now, there's some employees that we fired or laid off that qualify for unemployment. Fine, right? But if you quit or you break company policy or you stop showing up to work, no, you're not getting my unemployment dollars. So having that process, and then also simple things, remove them from the schedule, making sure their other shifts are covered. Going down to their we have people log in on their physical phones so they can have the schedule. So we log them out, so they never get the password, but we log them out of our systems that might be on their physical phones. So we're the only ones that can log them in or log them out. And when we can't log them out, we can also do a forced log out. So again, very simple things like that. And then we also have a group text message, so everybody in the company knows immediately that person's terminated, the leadership team. And the last part of the process we implemented recently is we let everybody else know that was working that day before they leave, just so you know this person isn't working anymore. And why? Because when you give people the data, when we're honest and transparent, they feel confident, they feel part of the team, they feel involved. When we don't tell people, they start talking and people get creative. And now we have to face the backlash versus coming out right away. And my number one customer is my employees. Right? I take care of the employees take care of the customers. So when we take care of our guys, so yesterday I went to go talk to the one guy, turned into, 10 of us, 12 of us in the operations room, and me talking from the heart of, that it's a privilege to work at this company, not a right. And everybody there was on board. Everybody there is empowered. Because again, the original thought yesterday was to demote that individual, and I don't believe in demotions. Hire, fire, promote. Those are the only 3 functions in HR from my perspective. Right. And every time you hire, fire, or promote, you let everybody else know in the organization what it means to be successful around here. I do not believe in demoting somebody, because if they're unable to do this job, going backwards is not healthy for anybody.
This is a bit of a masterclass that I did not expect, so I appreciate the way this is going. There's so many, again, good things in there, and I'll just take you to the 5th step when I say, tell me about your win, because you can hear it's with intentionality that I'm unpacking it in this way.
Oh, yeah, I love this conversation. Yeah.
What did you measure for the success of the terminations? Now, you've mentioned a few things already, but what's neat is months ago you would have measured dollars, cost of offboarding, and this kind of thing. What are you measuring now that you're going to say, you know what? If you had to have that 5-minute stand up with your guys and say, here's this, I'm going to say data points. They could be numbers or soft. What would you say to them? Or the top 3, 5 or whatever?
So we call them CSM. So I picked this up like 2 weeks ago from a presenter talking about marketing of all things. He calls them CSMs, common sense metrics. Okay.
Yep.
So this is what I realized last time after we let this individual go. A month ago, we went out and did paintball. That was our quarterly. Every quarter we do something, right? So this last quarter was paintball. When we did our quarterly paintball, everybody that was at paintball a month ago is still at our company. So my CSM there are the people that are bought into the culture are the ones that are going to be bought into the culture, right? It's that simple. They're willing to, on a Saturday, to hang out with their other employees. It was an hour and a half drive, plus hour and a half back, plus 4 hours of paintball. And we're talking, plus, it was an 8-hour day. You're willing to spend 8 hours on a Saturday, unpaid, to have fun with the leaders of this organization and your fellow coworkers. Every one of those people is bought into the culture. And when you're bought in the culture, you're going to be a good employee there. So there's the first CSM. Second thing is common sense metric. I mentioned this earlier, and it's important, right? Because it comes back to camaraderie. We measured camaraderie twice in our whole process. When we said this individual wasn't going to be, they called in, no one gave a shit. They're like, all right, fuck them, right? And at the end of the day, when we said we let him go, no one said a thing. They weren't like, oh yeah, screw that guy, we hated him. And they weren't like, oh, we really should have kept him up. No, they're like, all right, fine, he's not here, good. And this employee that was let go had conflict with another one of our guys. And that was the whole reason he called. He's like, I knew I was going to get in a fight with him. That's our number one guy. That guy's been here for years. He's the one that holds the standard in the field. It's like, oh, you don't like him? He is the standard. And there is some cultural, racial tones within our company because we hire everybody. And fine, everybody else, because I've asked him about this guy in particular. This guy's kind of a hard ass. On PI, he's an individualist, so that means he's stubborn. He's all about his way, right? And at the end of the day, the guys that want to work here love working with him. His name is Dan. They love working with him because he's a straight shooter. If you're a good employee, he's like, yep, I'll take you. If you're a shit employee, he'll tell you you're a shit employee. That's again, Dan's PI. That's who Dan is. And so this employee was like, I'm gonna have issues with Dan. It's like, well, Dan epitomizes what we want in this company. So if you have issues with Dan, you had issues with the company. We've had other new employees that aren't used to standards and discipline. And so they come here, they're like, Dan's kind of an asshole. It's like, yeah, Dan is kind of an asshole. You want to talk about it? Right? So the CSM there is, who do other people gravitate towards, right? Because every employee that comes into our organization has the opportunity to impact and shape the culture. That's one of those shit questions that I've heard in interviews. It's like, are you going to be a good fit for our culture? No, the question is, the better question is, how are you going to be a good fit for our culture? How are you going to benefit our culture? Because every single employee that walks in here has the opportunity to benefit our culture. So here's our third CSM I'm going to mention. So yesterday, after the firing happens, right? We're talking to the guys, and then they're doing their EODRs, their end of day driver reports. So at their end of day reports, drivers and crew chiefs are filling their reports. Now, this is something we rolled out recently, and they're still finger fucking it. It's all jacked up, right? And we're learning. And one of the employees, this guy's Regis, he's my guy. Regis is like, hey man, he's like, I had 6 jobs today, and I picked up 3 more. So now I did 9 jobs. I did more revenue than I was planning on doing today. I did more revenue than anybody else because now they're talking about numbers. And I go, you did? He goes, how am I going to get a piece of that? I go, that's a great question. How are you going to get a piece of that? I said, remember like 2 months ago we talked about bonus program next year? He's like, yeah. I go, this is the base for that bonus program. We need to establish the baseline so that we can figure out who deserves more because they're doing more. What is achievable? He goes, oh, cool. He's like, all right. I'll make sure my numbers are straight. Right? So now the CSM is, they're listening what I'm saying. I've been saying it for months, and now they're starting to see, oh, rubber beats the road. He's the same guy like 3-4 weeks ago. Every Tuesday we do training. Tuesday morning training, 1 hour, and we bring in donuts or bagels, right? Something simple. A month ago, he goes, hey, man, what is it going to take to get bacon and eggs around here? How do we get hot bread? I want real food, right? I got a bunch of grown-ass men. They want real food. I said, cool. This is what we're going to do. When you guys hit green on your 3 main metrics, right, which is on-time rate, dollars per hour, and and reviews, number of reviews per job, right? When you guys are green across the board, I'll buy you breakfast. I will buy you hot breakfast. So 2 weeks ago, they hit their numbers. So guess what? They got Chick-fil-A. Last week, they didn't hit their numbers. On-time rate was below our standard. Dollars per hour was below standard. So you know what? This morning, they got bagels. So it went from him challenging us, creating a problem, right? This guy wants hot breakfast, to, hey, how do we get the opportunity out of it? So the common sense metric is, they're starting to see what I want, right? This is what I want. I want numbers that lead us to the promised land. That's what I want as an organization. They're starting to figure out, how do we get there? So if you said, hey, Andy, you're going to spend $50 on breakfast, right? Whatever it ends up being, or $100 on breakfast, right? That delta is $50. Call it $50, 52 weeks. You're talking a $2,600 delta throughout the year. You're telling me for $2,600 a year, y'all will do exactly what I want you to do every single week? If the answer is yes, where's my credit card? Where's my checkbook? Right? So now the common sense metric I have is buy-in. Buy-in looks like one person has the what, one person has the how. When one person has both, there's no buy-in. And when neither person have either, there's no real stated goal. So now I get the what. Here are the metrics I want to hit. You get the how. Hot breakfast. Hot breakfast gets us there. Let's go. I talk about that in my book. That's of all things. There we go.
This is
the what and the how.
This is super valuable. I'm making a bunch of notes here as we go. Funny enough, when I mentioned I started the conversation, I help leaders win.
Yeah.
What I'm able to do then is start with that wins question, take them through this 5-part framework. It stimulates the type of conversation that we just had with every leader I meet. And I'm talking municipal leaders, leaders of $100 million, billion-dollar companies, and it gets them thinking in a way they haven't thought about their wins. And what we get a chance to do then is we get a chance to reverse engineer the win, find out what those parts were, and then we get to talk about what are we going to keep from that and what are we going to move going forward. What I can say, having dealt with a lot of leaders, is you're at a high level of sophistication. It takes forever to go through getting these layers into your culture and your business. So congratulations on the level that you've taken it to, because those nuances are that you're doing it day in, day out, month in, month out, and you're iterating, obviously, because like you said, 3 months ago it would have been different. Here we are now. You're in that position then where you're foundationally putting in that scaling opportunity I'm sure you might have in mind as you kind of grow your business. And I'm assuming, again, your listeners here are in that same sort of mode. So that 5-part framework would be on the top end of what I would call the executive planning system that I have underneath everything in there. But it starts with, what's the win? Let's talk about those wins. How do we get more wins? And actually, funny enough, I'll ask you, because you probably have this, but maybe you don't. Do you have a wins list that you keep track of?
Not in a document. The way we celebrate wins is in a group text message. So at the end of almost every week, or even yesterday, I wrote in our group text message what I'm proud of our team for. So we do document them in that way. But yeah, I have heard of having win boards, or we don't document them that way. We do document them. So every Tuesday morning training, we have an employee nominated every week for employee of the week. So it has to be a nomination from within the ranks. So an employee has to nominate another employee, and we talk about what they did and why. How does it relate back to our values? And they get a $50 gift card to a gas station nearby. So it's not it's not a zero amount of money, 50 or 20, maybe it's $50. And then so that's how we celebrate wins. We also, every week, we give bonuses out, cash bonuses for reviews. So we're celebrating those simple wins, those simple behaviors we want to see more of. And then as a team, every week during our L10, our leadership 10, we celebrate, hey, what were the things that were on our list we got done? What rocks did we achieve? So we're constantly celebrating wins in those ways. And then nice thing is, with our rocks and even our to-dos, we can look back. So every quarter, we look back at all of our rocks during our quarterly training and say, hey, look what we accomplished. And then it allows us, whatever challenges we're faced with this quarter now, we're like, hey, in 90 days, we're going to laugh about this. So let's start feeling good, right? Knowing that, it's a fucking mountain. And you know what? Look at all these mountains we climbed before. This is another mountain. This is another opportunity for us to show what we're capable of. And so, I would say all those ways we celebrate wins. I'm a maverick. My PI is Maverick, which means I make a decision. Once it starts the execution, I'm already on to the next fucking thing. So I typically, I have a predisposition to not celebrate wins. So it's absolutely a learned behavior to celebrate wins. And that's why we do our quarterly outings with our guys. We also do monthly family dinner. So once a month, we do family dinner. My mock cooks, and I always thank the guys. I always talk about what achievements we've had over the last month. This month, we're doing it next Thursday. So Thanksgiving theme. Packers are playing Thursday Night Football, so we're doing it a little bit later. And we're telling people, bring your family. So it's a end of year, not holiday, Packer family dinner. Because if we call it a holiday or a Christmas party, then it might exclude certain people within our organization. So to be inclusive, we're calling it a pack of year, celebrate the year so far, party, Moss cooking.
Nice. What meal? What's she cooking?
I don't know. She did catering for 30 years. I don't. I'll make venison because I got a couple deer last weekend, and the guys love it when I make venison. That's like their thing is. We also catered. One time we catered because my mom was out of town, and another time somebody else cooked. And one of my guys has been with me for 7 years. He's like, "Hey man," he goes, "When's your mom coming back?" Like, I'm like, "All right, that's like a raging endorsement that my mom's cooking is what the guys know what they want, you know."
So when I help leadership teams, the owner and his team or whatever that is, that wins list is a deep exercise that we take and we actually get them. We just start writing them all down, consolidating them, and then reflecting on them and ranking them in a sense where we can find gold in them to be able to go forward under the framework that I've described to you. So it's executivewins.com is where I do my work out of. I work in this way with leaders to take them through an organized process to look at their old wins, see what's there, see what we keep. What do we need to consolidate? What do we need to not do anymore? How do we get that to kind of go forward? And it's a pleasure to speak with you because of the high level that you've taken it to. It takes forever for these things to roll off your tongue this easily. You've invested obviously in yourself, your leadership abilities. It takes a long time to be this articulate. And I think funny enough, anybody listening to this conversation could lift it up, put it on their organization and get a lot of guidance to be able to kind of go forward. And that's my whole goal. Empower the leaders, make sure they've got all the pieces they need. A lot of folks that I deal with who aren't as articulate as you are, they just haven't thought about these things. And I'm able to help then coach them through what that looks like. And ultimately, if I can get them to my kind of checklist, which is a 700-page document underneath the 5 pillars that I've talked to you about right now, then I can guide them through a process in every area of their business and then get out of the way when the right vendor needs to get in. So if we have to talk at a high level about HR, then they can be in a position to talk to the HR people to come in and actually get better results as they kind of go forward. If we can get through the whole checklist in about a year, with me popping in and out of the situation, we can bulletproof the entire place and get it to the level. I think when I look at what you are, you're like level 10 out of 10 for the nuance that you've put into what it is, but it takes a long time to get there.
Yeah. So history, so 9 years ago, my brother and I started this thing.
Yeah.
Those first 4 years, I said I was uncoachable, unemployable, and unmanageable.
Right.
And then 5 years ago, I dropped the uncoachable part because I spent the first 4 years doing learning through osmosis, learning through doing, and I kept hitting ceilings, and I didn't know they were ceilings until I hit them.
Yeah.
And for the organization, the ceiling became me. Right. I tell people you can go the first 2-3 years probably without a business coach.
Sure.
Right, if you're really hard because you have enough ideas to implement, and then somewhere around the 2-3 year mark, you're going to become the ceiling to the organization. And so I advise people now get a coach, not day one, because you're going to put shitty data in day one.
Yeah.
So I say somewhere between years 2 and 3, when you have some idea of who you are, some idea of what the business is. I know people that have business coaches before they even start their business, and I was like, that's stupid. That's a drain. I also do consulting myself. So I'm there's a company I'm working with now. They've been in business 17 years. And it's like, and they're like, we've waited too long. It's like, well, yeah, maybe. Well, here we are, right? Right now is, it's like yesterday was a really good time to start. Today, it's like yesterday was better. Today is good. Tomorrow's too late. So it doesn't matter where you're at. So I say around that 2-3 year mark. I waited until about 4 years. Thankfully, my coach, I'm in a CEO roundtable, which is a better fit for me. And with him, I already knew him for 4 years. He's military background. He'd already given me the once over once or twice when I tried cop an attitude about stupid shit. Right. So it's like him and I are already, we good. Right. So we're good there. The other thing, so there's that. So I also tell people some people, the round table's the better fit. Some people it's the individual coaching's the better fit. Like find your flavor.
Find the flavor and find the, and by the way, never get reliant on one coach. Make sure you've got at least you need a nutritionist in there, a trainer, whatever, a therapist. I've referred out to a lot because there's moments when they're going childhood and I'm like, not my shtick. So how do you get that? But if you're I look at leaders like Olympic athletes, you know what I mean? If they've gotten it to a certain level, they're looking for tweaks. They're not looking for, don't run my business. I don't think that makes any sense. But the over-reliance, there's literature out there about the over-reliance on one voice, and that's a disaster. And then when they don't have a structure, sometimes they don't have a structure to what they're doing. I think that's also problematic if they're not following sort of a pathway.
Yeah, I mean, I'll break it down Barney style and make it really simple for the listeners and you to understand where I'm at. And this has taken 9 years to get where I'm at, right? Day one, I had none of these people. Now, I go to the gym twice a week. I have a trainer. It's not always the same. I'd say 90% of the time is the same guy because I go at the same times every week, right? So he's his name's Brian. He's my age. Like he pushes me. He knows he can push me, tell me to drop my shoulders, breathing, push harder. Also, he's the same token. He's like, hey, I can see you're straining. Let's take the weight down this week so we don't hurt ourselves, right? So it's not like push. Like he meets me where I'm at. So 2 days a week I go to the gym. That's a great baseline. Every other week, every other Monday, I meet with Miss Jody. Miss Jody's been my counselor for years. She was my counselor 15 years ago when I got home from Iraq. I went like 10 years without therapy, or 8 years, whatever it was. And then when I called the VA back a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, when I was struggling, they wanted to give me a different counselor. I'm like, nope, Miss Jody's my lady. That's where I go. So I've been seeing her. Actually, now it's almost been 4 years consistently. That helps. Once a month, I do my CEO roundtable. And also with my group of there's 14 of us, and then also once a month I sit down with my my coach, he's the chair for the roundtable. That helps. The other thing is the Bolt Accelerator. So Bolt Accelerator, Barry, who's going to be on the show week after next. So he's going to be on the show the 10th of December. We started with a Bolt Accelerator about 3 months ago, and it's an industry best practices roundtable. That's the best way to put it. Mastermind, but it's a weekly program we do. So it's 1 hour every week. I was completely against going with an industry roundtable because I had this scarcity mindset. It's like, A, I don't want to give away the shit I do, right? And B, I know everything, right? Like, again, because I'm bold and that's fine. And now that I've been in the roundtable, again, I realize how much I don't know. And so all those people that I surround myself with, it's tweak. And that's in addition to every week I do this podcast. 134 episodes. We've been doing this 2.5 years. I've missed maybe 4 or 5 weeks in 2.5 years. Every week I get an opportunity to talk to somebody that can improve my business, my professional life, or my personal life, because I dedicate this 1 hour to having this conversation. Right? I get a lot of this podcast. I give away the answers for free because it used to be I used to talk to people on the phone all the time. Now I'm like, how about I dedicate 1 hour and give away all the answers to everybody else? So those are all the people in my life that enable me to tweak and ultimately live the life I want to live. And it's taken all these years of doing this to get where we're at. Real quick before I forget, because it keeps bothering me. Because again, nuance, or where in Canada are you from?
I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, so north of Montana. So
you're less Canadian sounding than most. However, the butte that it calls you. Also, Barry. Here's the deal. Shout out Canada, right? I know I'm gonna be political for a second. I know you have a shitty prime minister. I'm just gonna say that out there. He's got like a 23% approval rating. However you take that, I don't give a fuck. I can talk about American politics, Canadian politics. I'll talk Canadian politics for a second. A couple things about Canada while we're on the topic. The truckers, fucking love those guys. I wanted to be Canadian for that week. I was a truck driver in Iraq. We'd run trucks here. I also hate rules, regulations, government. Here's the deal about Canada, though. Some of my favorite people in the world right now and companies are Canadian. So we got the Bolt Accelerator, my guy Barry over there running the Bolt Accelerator, 505 Junk Removal, which is a $5 million junk removal company out there in Vancouver. I got Jobber. Everyone knows I fuck with Jobber. Jobbers
at Edmonton. They're out of here.
Edmonton. Yep. I'm still waiting to get up there and go hang out with them at headquarters. They featured me in commercials, on podcasts. They've been very good to me for the last 7 years I've worked with them. And then the third one is Nice Job. We had a guy on Alistair, a Canadian guy or a British guy in Canada with Nice Job. And with Nice Job, they got so I'm an affiliate. So I promote what they do as a way to promote our podcast, and also a way to promote other people within our company, or the other junk roll companies within our industry. Because what Nice Job does, it's all about reviews. And with reviews and your credibility, it drives your credibility, that common sense metrics. Also drives your SEO. And so what Nice Job does is it implements with other operation software to put drip campaigns out there for your customers, so you increase the amount of reviews you have. And so Taylor sent me a message, because Taylor's awesome like that. Taylor's like, make sure you mention Nice Job. So there was a good transition Canadian wise. So Nice Job has a new deal coming out. It's right there. Click that. Essentially, you pay $1 for 2 months. So we know how important reviews are for SEO. We know how important reviews are for people that will evaluate whether they want you in their house. And with Nice Job, a couple things, you can get the reviews. You're going to get more of them. You can decide which reviews get posted to a certain extent. You also can decide where they get posted. So in our area, Google is the king. So we push people to send things to Google, whether it's Yelp, Facebook, Google, wherever you want to send people. You have some control over where you send the reviews to drive SEO and to ultimately drive traffic to your business. So yes, nice job. There's the code. Thanksgiving, Black Friday special, $1 a month for 2 months. This is the time of year, throughout the year, this is the time typically when you get slower. So now we got to take advantage of every customer we get, because every review matters. So there's the shout out to nice job.
Well, there you go. And Canadians representing from our little big country out here. That's a good thing, and appreciate the appreciation. I was going to go back in your leadership journey, because you talked about a moment of being uncoachable and then being coachable. And that's through dollar losses, crisis, whatever, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot that it takes for those egos to move forward. What was the internal voice going on that allowed those transitions to occur? Because that's an internal sort of thing.
Yeah, how do I say? I preach, right? And actually, I was doing consulting and coaching for others. Hey, let me teach you what I've learned along the way. And then there got kind of my ego got fed. Like, oh, Andy, you're top of the mountain. And it's like, man, there's bigger fucking mountains, baby. Right? Look through the clouds, look through the fog. There are people that know a hell of a lot more than you, right? And there's that old adage, right? When you say, hey, it's better to train people and have them leave than it is to not train them and have them stay. And so this all started at the end of 2019. So at the time, end of 19, I was getting out of a franchise organization that was really toxic. And I said, okay, I want to decide where I go moving forward here. So one of the challenges I had when I was part of the franchise is it really limited what I was able to do. And so as soon as I started breaking away from the franchise, I'm like, oh, hold on. There are no rules anymore. There's no restrictions. I can say what I want, do what I want, hire who I want, build the company I want. And then I didn't go looking for a coach. A guy that I had known through a chamber hit me up, and he was the one, he's military. He's like, hey, come to this group. I'm starting a CEO roundtable. I was like, all right, whatever. And of course I blew off the first one. So the one that happened in January, I blew off. So I was like, whatever. And then went to one in February. And I remember it was on my phone like half the time. I was like, it's fucking another networking event. This is bullshit. And then we did an exercise though. And I was like, oh, that was a really good exercise. Like, and I'm like, oh, maybe there is something to this. And then he not pressed me, but he's like, hey, you should join. And what I realized in my life, and this is very true with people, it's like, I rarely regret things. I never really regret things. I choose not to regret things. I choose to find the gratitude in things. The things that I would have done different is the things that the inaction, the inactivity, right? When I execute at a high level, when I execute in the moment, those are typically the good things that I do. So for example, here on a personal level, there's this woman I've been talking to recently, and all of a sudden I had to cancel into my schedule, right? And I was like, hey, you want to go out tonight? Right? Like a quick, like, instead of like overthinking it, overprocessing, I'm like, hey, you want to go out tonight? She's like, yeah. So we went out, right? We had coffee, nothing. And it's like, all right, cool. Like, because otherwise I just sat there, right? And thought this through. Same with coaches. Like, I could have spent 6 months researching a bunch of coaches and not made a decision. Instead, it was serendipitous. Now, this year, I joined a CEO roundtable. I sought it out. I researched it. I joined it. And after 6 months, I go, yeah, this ain't for me. Right? So in that case, I made a decision. I'm like, okay, I followed the same process, and this is not for me. So I didn't hem and haw and bitch and moan. I let the lady know who runs the roundtables, hey, not a good fit. Find me another group, and either it's a good fit or not. If that's not a good fit, or then I'll bounce. Right? When it's a good fit, I'll bounce. When it's when it's not a good fit, I'll leave. And when it is a good fit, I'll stay. Very, very simple. Those are the only two things that can happen. Right? And so follow the process and then measure the results. And so since I've been coachable, I wrote a book about words, so I talk about this. So I no longer talk about being uncoachable. I acknowledge that I was there at one point, right? I love on that part of me that was uncoachable to acknowledge that it exists, right? This is there's two wolves inside you, right? The wolf of love and abundance, and there's all those wolves of hate and scarcity and insecurity, right? And I'm going to starve that second wolf, and I can still also love it. Right, and that's really philosophical for a Drunken World podcast at 12 o'clock in the morning. And yet, I think folks are thinking this stuff. So the ability to articulate it or be open, vulnerable about it, or whatever, let people know, gives them the license to allow this to occur. I moderated a panel for 400 people in a big ballroom here in Edmonton recently, and the topic was the stigma of mental health.
And so when we get back to talking about this people side, it's as we go through the decades and we get further along and whatever, and it's interesting to hear about your military background, and there's a big piece of that in there too. The mental health piece is not getting dealt with for a lot of folks that are doing this thing. So again, this framework and this ability to get in and allow those conversations to occur, super important. Because again, when you're ignoring those parts or you think you're uncoachable or whatever, but I just mean to say, congrats on the work you've done. That's a lot of heavy lifting. It's a lot of learning to go along the way. But to get at this moment in time where you're moving with speed and pace and confidence, that's a neat thing, because you'll be working for another 60 years anyway, so you're good to go.
Yeah, might as well go hard in the paint, right? It's Jordan Peterson talks about that, and it's very well known, right? You pick the cross, or it gets bestowed upon you, right? So, example, like, you can either choose to go to the gym, right? Or you can have health problems later in life. Like, it's going to be work either way, right? Hell, this time of year for businesses, I tell them, like, you can either get your numbers in order and get your pro forma ready and have a plan for next year, or you can work your ass off next year and then just say, well, where'd all the money go? And then have to work really hard the next year. Real quick, I want to answer Eric's question. Eric with a Q, Eric Ship out there in Denver. He was a longtime listener, newer Q Hall junk removal out there in Colorado. He was a guest on the show last week. So he asked, why did you implement the standing up part? So first and foremost, I give credit where credit is due. I did not implement that. My implementer, conveniently named in our company, he is the one, or integrator. He is the one that implemented that. And the whole reason is because it's a closed conversation. When you sit down, now all of a sudden it's turning into a coffee hour. Now it turns into a discussion. When we fire people, it's not a discussion. Here's your name. Here's our values. Here's what you did or didn't do. Here's our course of action. Sign and drive. And so he decided that like 2 months ago. He's like, and I don't know if he decided it or it just happened that way. He goes, yeah, I didn't even sit down. He's like, in and out, get him out of there. Like, what does it matter? And what's funny is, like 2 weeks ago, him and I were both at the same seminar, and the guy at the seminar, Guyer Maxwell, another Canadian, shout out Canada, Guyer Maxwell, Big Little Legends. That's a great book. I talked about that last week. Taylor, put that in the comments. Buy that book. I have a copy of that book. I'm going to read it. Guyer Maxwell, good fucking dude. Anyways, he brought up, I was going somewhere with this. Oh, what he brought up? He brought up 2 movies to watch. Air, the Michael Jordan story. Great. So I watched that the same day because it's a dope story, and I grew up on the 90s Bulls. So, like, yeah, all about that. And the other movie he brought up was Moneyball, which is another one of my favorite movies, because I love the fact that it's all data driven, right? And I love the fact that you got, the David, right, the underdog team, Oakland A's, going, and how do they win in a, as a small market team? And I know that I'm a Packers fan. We got the Bucks and Brewers here in Milwaukee. Right, between the Packers, the Bucks, and the Brewers, they're one of these smallest markets. Green Bay by a lot, obviously, and then Milwaukee. I think baseball is the smallest market. Basketball is the smallest, or maybe second smallest behind Memphis. So I'm used to small market teams. Anyways, Andrew watched Moneyball that weekend, and he was talking about when there's a whole discussion on how to fire people. Right, it's keep it short, keep it sweet, or not fire them, but hey, we're moving you down to the minors, or we're trading you, like making a short conversation. And Andrew watched the movie, and he texted me. Andrew, who's my integrator, and he's like. He sat down. He goes, I don't even sit down when I fire people. Like it was like, oh yeah, that actually works. So now, like, again, something that happened organically is now a best practice. So if you walk into our conference room for a one-on-one conversation and we don't sit down, don't get comfortable because you're about to walk out the door. And that will be that. And actually that first time he let that guy go when he stood up, the guy wanted to come back in because he's like, hey, get all your shit, get out of here. Guy wanted to come back in. He's like, oh, this guy's my ride. It's like, cool. You don't work here anymore. Like, you can wait by the car. He can open the car, turn the heat on. We don't give a shit, right? You're not allowed in this building. Like, very cut and dry. Like, nope, you're not allowed here. And so, well, again,
I'm glad you brought up money. I'm glad you brought up Moneyball, because the arc of, again, that risk taking to move from the traditional way that we did. Here's how we did things before. And we've already talked about this in this conversation. I was uncoachable, then I was coachable. But there's a moment where that doesn't happen in a day. Like, that takes time to get that in place. And the Moneyball arc, I love this idea of one guy internally getting past all the objections internally and then going forward in spite of all the headwinds, because they had to go through that beginning thing. That's a remarkable thing. And I think it's just takes forever to, again, layer on the pieces. And if you have a structure to do it, you're going to be in better shape.
Well, yeah, here I will. We'll talk about that structure because I love talking about this. I talk about it in my book. I talk about it in life because it is true. How do I do this? Am I sharing my screen right? Here we go. Add to the stage sheet. I do technology stuff. The hero's journey, baby. I am all about the hero's journey, right? You got the call to action. In order for you to take that hero's journey, you have to go into the underworld. You have to go into the unknown. You have to hit the abyss. You got to lose your mentor and your friends and everybody else along the way, right? Yeah, and it's like rock. This is classic, right? Rock bottom is a hell of a place to build a foundation. I talked about this yesterday with our company. Last October, I brought in EOS. We were faltering last year. I had hired a guy to take over as the general manager and then eventually president of the company. I gave him the reins. The company was faltering. I let him go the 22nd of December. The 26th of December was the first day our new operations guy worked, and also the first day back, a guy who had left earlier in the year, who had come back, who was basically pushed out by the president. He came back. Like Christmas Day last year, that was the bottom, right? Because I lost in a 90-day period, we lost 9 of our 11 top employees. I only fired 1 of them. Everybody else got out because we said this is the standard, and either you abide by the standard or you don't. So as of January 1st of this year, there are 5 people. There are 5 people in our company that were here on January 1st of last year. 5 out of 20. Like, we completely rebuilt this company because I was willing to go in the abyss. I was willing to lose every single person in our organization so that the organization lived on. Years ago, I did a keynote. I thought about this yesterday randomly. Someone asked me about if I did this one anymore. I used to do a keynote called Your Organization is an Organism, because the traditional organization, hierarchy, this is what it looks like, right? It comes from the military, and 20 years in the military. Like, I understand this organization, right? And then there's the organism. Right, you think about an organism in a science class, right? You have the nucleus, and then you got all this other shit, right? And so I did this whole, it was like a 45-minute keynote about treating your organization like an organism. And once you realize that, this is rigid, right? Very defined. And yet you think about an organism, you have a nucleus, like, yeah, you have to have a nucleus, we have to have a starting point, but you grow on beyond. This is like, I'm in charge and everyone just fucking listens to me. Well, that's stupid. More like, here's me, and I influence people. And the organism can expand, contrast, it can shape, it can mold, it can flow through life. It can squeeze, through opportunities, if you will. And so with that mindset, right? Stick your nucleus. Within your nucleus is your values and your beliefs and all that stuff. It's like, that doesn't change. And everything around that you talked about earlier, who are the people? Who are the processes? What are the values? All those things protect the nucleus. So there you go. There's another random bit. Again,
it's not random at all, because these as you convey your images, standing up is a good image, and that's something that makes it accessible. Like, if we just said, "Oh, stand up when you fire people," then you could build out all the steps that are underneath what that means. What motivated? What do you mean you don't sit down? And then you can actually then talk about your process and what that is. And when, again, if you're here to encourage, again, your industry and the folks that are owners in this industry to get better, this is a great way to share things. So all those things make it just a lot easier to get into.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson, right? 12 rules for life. Rule number 1, stand up straight. Hell, even right now, I'm standing up on my podcast. This is like 2 months ago. I realized that when I stand up, when I do my podcast, I got more energy, I got more enthusiasm, because otherwise I sit back in my chair and I get, no. So I got a standing desk, and now I stand up. Again, Jordan Peterson, another Canadian. I'm not sure. We might have to do like a Celebrate Canada Day. Although I did joke with somebody, you guys don't really have an Independence Day because you didn't earn it. You guys just like asked the British to not be their subjects anymore. And they're like, all right, bet. Like, and you're also part of the Commonwealth. You guys still like, so like, it's like, what do you call it? It's like Independence Light. We fought for ours, we put up a document, talked some shit, fought a war. Basically, we fought a war financed by liquor. That's pretty much tells you how the United States is. We're like, hey, everybody gets a gun, and we're going to finance this thing through whatever, with not apple cider vinegar. What was George making? Apple or hard apple cider, essentially. So yeah, we're gonna finance the war through booze. Got the W. I don't even drink, and I think that's a great story. Anyways, all right. This has been a very fast hour, Gordon. What do you want to talk about? We got 5 minutes left. I've done all the talking at this point, which is unlikely. I suppose some episodes are like that.
It's been, when I meet the folks that are high functioning, what's nice for me is I gather up a lot of stories. So right now I could tell you about someone who took their mid-sized company, came in as chief financial officer and took their mid-sized company from asset-based lending to traditional lending, saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I could talk to him about another story of someone who, for their municipality, moved a quote from $30 million for wetlands reclamation down to $3 million. We go through the same five-part structure in deconstructing those wins and allow then an opportunity. I have the Executive Wins podcast is going to be starting up on January 20th in the new year. By using this type of, like literally, if this had been a conversation that could go on that podcast, what do we get a chance to do? We get to hear Andy's best stuff. You went deep, you went authentic, you created an atmosphere for other people to be accessible and allow them to learn. And that's my whole shtick, is to empower the leaders to learn. And with my facilitative coaching ability, that's what I've done my whole career. But this is the opportunity now to get that out to a wider audience, but get a bit, it's not just what's the win, 5 sentences, 3 minutes later. It's let's dig in and find out what that looks like. Let's put some meat on it and really find out where you got that done so that somebody else can listen to that, get the inspiration they need, like the comment that you got in from your listener, and say, wait a second, tell me a little bit more about that piece about letting people go. Letting people go, by the way, alone, if they'd listened to this, would have been a huge win, because most people do it wrong. Most people don't invest in sort of getting it right. So that's if I can empower one more leader, have one more great conversation like this, get it out to a wider audience, and make sure that then other leadership teams can benefit, then what are we doing? We're capacity building with the leader, but we're also then helping them to capacity build within their organization. Better organizations, better impact on all their stakeholders in their group, ultimately will strengthen entire economies right from this kind of conversation.
Yeah, no, first, I would love to be a guest in your show. January 20th, it's inauguration day. It's also my brother's birthday. So that's random. No, I would love to be a guest on your show, sometime, whenever you're available.
Sounds good.
This is a learned behavior. That's one of the things, actually, we'll get to the big finish here, which are our top takeaways. So I'm gonna do my top takeaway first. I have a lot of natural instincts as an entrepreneur. I'm fourth generation. I'm unemployable. Fourth generation of men that are unemployable. I got two brothers. Neither one of them have jobs. Like, we work really hard to not have jobs. And I say that bit all the time because that's what it comes down to, right? So I have a predisposition. I watched my father run a business for 30 years. I used to do estimates in the basement because I could type faster than my mom. Like, all these things, right? So I grew up with this. It's in my veins. And there's plenty of opportunities for me to get learned behaviors where I go out of my way to seek the information that's not already having a predisposition within me. And that's the opportunity. When I meet a lot of entrepreneurs, like, this is the way I've always done it, or this is the way that it's normal and natural. It's like, get fucking uncomfortable then, right? P.T. Barnum, right? Comfort is the enemy of progress, right? Learned behavior is the key. So one thing I'll say for you is my life changed since I got into coaching. Got coaching, right? It's one thing to coach. I coach and I teach, and I love that. I learn a lot that way. I also learn tons by being receptive to receiving coaching. So whether it's Gordon or anybody else, right? I am a huge proponent. One of the things we figured out last mastermind weekend, and I guess this will be my last plug, I'm gonna do another mastermind weekend, the 24th, 25th of January. So next mastermind weekend, 24th, 25th of January. We're gonna go over pro formas and financials for next year, and the operations and marketing that you will implement in order to hit your pro forma. Anyways, last mastermind weekends about a month ago, one thing we realized was that the number is somewhere between 1% and 2.5% of your top line revenue needs to get reinvested into coaching. So when you're running, let's call it simple hillbilly math, $500,000 a year business, that means somewhere between $5,000 and $12,500 gets reinvested into building your business, whether that's team building activities, whether that is you going to conferences or you receiving coaching, you get into a mastermind. That is the investable portion.
Well, and I'll throw in a number of 50,000 to 250,000 over about a 3-year period. And I say that as numbers up front, because what's going to happen is today you need the marketing help. Next time you need the web guy. Next time you need the coach. Next time you need the whatever. But if you can get those numbers in your mind early, and make that where you're headed, which is this is a provable investment. And I think a business, if you go life to death, it's probably about 15 people by the time it starts and finishes. Starts out with your bookkeeper, then you get the accountant, then you probably bring in an HR extra and whatever and it moves on and on as we get through. Then maybe you're going to exit, and you're right now you're talking about working towards a multiple for the sale anyway. So this idea of bulletproofing it all along the way, making it as sort of attractive as possible so it gets there is certainly the goal. But I'm glad to hear you've got a statistically based 1 to 2% investment in that side. And I would just, again, expand that to say, get some serious numbers. And if you can make them real, you're walking proof of the results. Like if you added up all the dollars you've invested in these areas, you tried something, it didn't work. Time also, then you have to add in your own hourly rate and multiply that in. So when I say 50, 250 for certain size businesses, of course it's more when you scale, but yeah, that's good.
Yeah, no, I know my numbers. I invest 2.5% of our top line revenue into myself every year.
Awesome.
That's my CEO roundtable. Or organizationally, right? So that's my
that's
CEO roundtable.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my integrator CEO roundtable. That's the conferences I'm going to. Like next year, I'm going to Waste Expo. I'm going to Recycle Materials Association. They're not even asking me to plug.
Right. Yeah, you got those events planned out. So again, if you go to the case literature too, you're like Procter and Gamble. In the years when they're investing 3% to $200-300 million, and then they get the next Swiffer. They get the next whatever. They build $1 billion product line. But if they get away from that, and they've had different CEOs in different times, if they get away from that, then they lose, and they're not on the development cycle that they need to be consistently on.
Yep. All right. Well, let's get to no, I love it. I love what you're saying. Invest. That's what it's all about. Because when it comes to business, you already took the plunge. You already got away from the safety and security of a paycheck every other week. And often people get to a place where they're comfortable again. It's like, that's the time to get uncomfortable. That's the time to invest. So Gordon, what's your top takeaway from today's conversation?
I'll go with the stand-up, but also the nuance of what it takes to be in the stand-up. And funny enough, you mentioned stand-up at your desk, stand-up in those moments. And I also appreciate, beyond even what you're saying, is the comfort in your tone of voice. So you are very well grounded when you are saying what you are saying. And that would be very different if I'd met you 9 years ago as the uncoachable guy, because you would have been telling me. Whereas I think when you say what you say with the confidence level that you've earned, that's really good. And I mean to always get that across to folks too, is what does it sound like? Let's get below the words for a second. What does that sound like? What's the body posture? What's going on there? And you can hear that you've learned and earned those lessons. It's not you reading from a book. It's really earned and learned. So I really appreciate that.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, communication is 93% nonverbal, right? We know it's 55% your tone, 38% your body language, or vice versa. I'm never sure. I know it's 7% the words. I focus on that. That's the book I wrote, Words Fucking Matter. That's the name of the book, because I focus on the words. And yes, I appreciate you pointing that out in me, because I've also known that along the way, there's an adage like fake it till you make it, which is bullshit. It's not fake it till you make it. It's face it while you make it, right? And there are times, right? That's my adage, right? Because it's like that nuance makes a difference, which goes in line with one of my next books I'm writing, which is Phrases Fucking Matter, focusing on the nuance. And I like the word you use, nuance, because I talk about the nuance that separates those that are growth minded versus fixed minded. That's essentially that's essentially the working title of Phrases Fucking Matter. I was going somewhere with this.
Well, and I'll just jump into your word use there and pick up on another takeaway from you today. And I have it in my notes earlier on, but maybe you can just remind me. You've got 3 clear values in your company.
Yeah.
3 words. What were they?
Hungry, dependability, camaraderie.
Those are unique. It's not respect.
Oh, fuck.
Be nice to each other. Do you know what I mean? So what I mean to say is those words are well chosen and again earned, because they reflect your business really, really well. So whatever you did, whatever that process was you took to get there, which is now driving the big win that we talked about here today, that clarity of words is again rare, because people take on the copy language. They won't live and earn language, and those are very well earned. So that's another big takeaway for me today.
So 2 things. I remember where I was going with that. Where I was going with that thing before was in the past I used to project what I wanted, my ideals, and now I own it. So that's what you're saying, that authenticity and ownership, because we're actually doing it. 6 months ago, I'd have been like, these are our values, and da-da-da. Now I'm like, no, these are our values, and this is how we do it. There's a huge difference. So I started with projection. Well, you start with like questioning, then projection, and then owning. And I went through those process. Second thing, to your point, last year, January, we sat down to establish our values, and exactly the values we had before were, here are 3 or 4 words that anything matter, right? And also, it's interesting what you said was the previous company I worked with when I was a franchise, the 3 values were respect, integrity, and trust.
Yep.
Who gives a shit?
But that's
right. That is we call that in EOS permission to play. Like, that's the fucking bare minimum.
It's table stakes. It's table stakes. That's all it is.
It's bullshit. So the way that we got to hungry, dependability, and camaraderie was an exercise that we did with EOS. 7 or 8 of us, whatever it was in the room, we put every single word up on the board. And then we combine words that are basically the same thing. And then you eliminate words that don't say enough or aren't unique, right? Permission to play. You get rid of the permission to play words like integrity and respect, like bare minimum shit, right? And then you boil it down. And I think at one point we had like 7 or 9 values. And then the thing that I love what our implementer said, this is the guy that implements, our EOS process. He said, less is more. Now we do junk removal. We declutter people's houses. We know that when there's less shit in the house is better, right? There's less shit to trip over. There's more creative space. I also know in my head, the less shit I have in my head, the more capacity I have for creativity. So we went from that 7 to 9, and he goes, less is more, 3 is the minimum. I go, cool. Let's boil this down from 100 to 30 to 9 to 3. Let's boil it down to 3. So hungry, dependability, and camaraderie. And of those 3, camaraderie was mine. The other 2 weren't mine, right? So I'm responsible for 1/3 of our values. Our team is responsible for the other 2/3 of our values. And that was the key of that exercise. It wasn't Andy's projection. It was Andy's vision of what the company is and where we're going. And it was the collective coming and figuring out, okay, how are we going to get there, right? That's that what and that how we talked about earlier, right? So this is what? This is the company I want, right? This is what it looks like. How the hell do we get there? And so the people that have been working with me are like, these are the 3 things that matter the most. And now every conversation we have, every coaching conversation we have, whether we're coaching everybody up, we either coach them up or we coach them out. Those are the directions, right? Up or out comes back to those values. When someone's doing something right, we're like, hey, appreciate you being hungry. Appreciate, like the guy yesterday who picked up 3 extra jobs. Appreciate you being hungry. Appreciate you being dependable to get your jobs done on time. Right, in camaraderie. The guys that work with you want to work with you because you're bringing in more jobs. More jobs mean more opportunities for tips, more opportunities for reviews, and also more opportunities for hours, right? Because people want to work with you. So in that case, look at this thing you did, and look, it checks all the marks, right? And when we let those other guys go, 2 of the 3 of those dependability. Hey, we depended on you doing this. You chose not to. Actually, all 3 of them were dependability. You chose not to follow the company values. You chose not to do what was best for our business, for our customers, for our organization. You did what was best for you, and so you can go be an army of one somewhere else. There you go.
Love where that's going. I have to add in one thing that's just fascinating to me right now in consolidating some of. Sorry, when I think about your trajectory, you said clearly when we remove junk from people's houses, it makes a more creative space and whatever. I'm suggesting that the way listening to you today, you're clearing junk from business owners' minds.
Oh yeah, that's what we do. We junk removal is a thing we do. That's a service we offer. Really, we're put on this earth to ease the burden, remove the stress, right? And that's the peace of mind. We sell peace of mind. Ultimately, we sell peace of mind. I had a guest on the show about a month ago, and he goes, the reason I'm in this industry, he's been in it 17 years. He said, the reason I'm in this industry is because I know that we do good. I know that when we leave the place that we're in, the place is better than when we found it.
I appreciate that you're describing your business. What I'm saying is you literally are removing junk from business leaders' minds that are listening to this. You're clearing, like in the same way that you would talk about which room do you go into, which one do you not go into, which one do they need help with. That's a remarkable image in terms of how you've used this basis that you've got, pulling it all together at this leadership level, and how neat that you could be clearing out people's minds and they could call 1-800 clear out my head. Would be a very valuable service for them as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's my life's work, right? I talk about my why. It's to breathe life into people, places, and products I interact with. And so what I do in junk removal is consistent with what I do in this podcast. Is consistent with what I do when I do consulting and coaching. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's a great image. It's a great image. Yeah.
Yeah. Less creates more. All right. This has been a great conversation, Gordon. I'm excited for the opportunity to be on your podcast, your new podcast you're launching next year. We'll have Taylor putting the banners in or whatever, your contact information if people want to get
Sounds good.
You. I love the idea of dissecting the wins, right? Begin with the end state in mind. What went right and how do we dissect that and how do we repeat that, right? I talk about processes. Processes need to be systematic. They need to be thorough. They need to be repeatable. And when there are those 3 things, we can get more of them. So the process of how do we get wins? I love your 5-step methodology.
And a lot of it is what I'll call the anatomy of a win. How do we actually get in there and make that again? We want to know.
Yeah, let's life hacks. It's all about simplifying life and life hacks. So, Gordon, absolute pleasure. All right, coming up on the show next week, we have a live in-person guest. It's going to be great. His name's Ricky. Ricky from Chuck It Junk Removal, Canadian, on theme, on brand. He'll actually be here in studio. So next week, him and his wife and their team are coming down here to see our warehouse, and we're going to build out their next year's plan. So they're going to be in-house. So you're going to hear right from a junk removal company and a junk removal owner. He's been in the business 17 years. He runs a very successful organization. And so hearing from him how he got 17 years in business and also what pitfalls we help fall along the way. I talked about him earlier. I said, hey, 17 years in business, and now he's first getting coaching and consulting because it's absolutely worth it. The week after that, we got Barry coming on from 505 Junk and also the Bolt Accelerator. Again, another Canadian. So maybe we'll call this episode Canadian AF. Canadian as fuck. That's been the theme of the day. Jobber, nice job. Bolt Accelerator, Chuck It Junk Removal, and Gordon Sheppard, all our Canadian friends doing amazing work that are supporting our industry. If you want to be a guest on the show, go to trashtalkbusinesspodcast.com and become a guest. We are doing the shows. I will be doing them mornings and afternoons moving forward into next year. So keep track of when we're doing them. Next episode is going to be an afternoon. The episode on the 10th of December is going to be a morning episode. I am going to take a break over the holidays, so no episodes on the Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, or that first week in January. So after the next couple episodes, we're going to take 3 weeks off, and we'll get back to it second week of January. So thank you to all the listeners. Thank you to Gordon being our guest. Thank you to Taylor, our producer. As always, I'm Andy Weins, and this has been another amazing week here on the Trash Talk Business Podcast. Bye now.
Thanks for listening. Tap subscribe or follow to get the latest episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a review and tell a friend to listen. To learn more, visit trashtalkbusinesspodcast.com. Bye now.